There comes a time in every heart's journey when silence becomes stronger than words, when walking away holds more power than begging to be understood. For so long, you may have believed that love meant proving your worth, chasing what was slipping away, holding on even when your soul was tired. You gave, you tried, you waited, and still, he thought you would come running back, that your empathy would outweigh your wisdom. But this time was different. You chose peace over pain, self-respect over approval, and in that choice, you rediscovered your strength. Disappearing was not an act of revenge. It was an act of awakening. It was the moment you realized that chasing someone who thrives on your attention only keeps you trapped in their story. The moment you stopped running, you reclaimed your energy, your dignity, your identity. Silence became your statement, distance became your boundary, and healing became your victory. What he mistook for indifference was, in truth, your rebirth, the quiet revolution of a heart that finally remembered its worth. And though he may never understand the depth of your decision, your disappearance became the loudest message you could ever send, that you no longer need to be chosen. Because you have already chosen yourself, there are moments in life when silence holds a power that words can never reach. When the noise of explanation, pleading, and justification finally fades, what remains is the quiet strength of truth. Walking away does not always mean defeat. Sometimes it is the highest form of self-respect. The power of silence lies in what it represents: the refusal to participate in what no longer nourishes your soul, the courage to end a cycle that feeds on your energy, and the wisdom to understand that not every battle deserves your voice. Silence becomes sacred when it is chosen from awareness rather than fear. When someone expects you to chase them, they assume your worth depends on their validation. They rely on your reaction to feel significant, your attention to feel powerful. But when you choose silence, the dynamic changes. The energy that once flowed toward them returns to you. In that quiet space, you begin to see things as they truly are, not through the lens of longing, but through the clarity of self-awareness. The noise of confusion begins to settle, and what rises is peace. Silence reveals truths that words often hide. It shows who values you, who manipulates you, and who only loved your giving, not your being in your own life. You may have been taught that love means persistence, that caring means never giving up. But there comes a time when continuing to explain yourself drains your spirit, and staying where you are unseen becomes self-betrayal. Silence then becomes your act of love, not for them, but for yourself. It is the moment you stop arguing with blindness and start honoring your clarity. It is not coldness, it is closure. You are no longer fighting to be heard, because you have finally heard yourself. That stillness is not emptiness. It is freedom breathing through you. Walking away in silence does what 1,000 words cannot. It interrupts manipulation, it exposes truth, and it shifts power back to where it belongs within you. Those who once took your presence for granted begin to feel the weight of your absence. They hear the echo of your silence louder than any confrontation. But the beauty of this act is not in what they learn, it is in what you become. You transform from a seeker of validation into a guardian of peace. You stop performing love and start living truth. Silence teaches you that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is to let go gracefully, without bitterness, without blame. And as you walk away, you carry not anger but awareness, not revenge but rebirth, not noise but power, the quiet, unshakable power of a soul that has finally remembered its worth. There comes a point in every journey when the heart grows weary of chasing what was never meant to stay. Desperation begins softly, a hope, a longing, a need to be understood. It tells you that if you just try harder, love deeper, or prove yourself enough, things will finally fall into place. But with each attempt, you lose a little more of yourself. You bend, you shrink, you compromise, until you realize that what you're calling love is not love at all, but survival. The shift from desperation to dignity begins the moment you understand that chasing someone who keeps walking away is not devotion. It is self-abandon. Desperation speaks in the language of fear. It whispers that you are not enough, that your value depends on being chosen, that if you stop trying, you will lose everything. But dignity speaks in silence and stillness. It reminds you that love cannot be begged for, that connection built on pursuit is not a connection at all. When you choose self-respect, you stop running after what depletes you and begin walking toward what restores you. The energy once spent on proving your worth becomes the foundation for rebuilding it. This choice is not easy. It feels like loss at first, but with time, you realize it was freedom disguised as heartbreak in your own life. You may remember moments when you confused attention with affection, or effort with value. You believed that if you could just make them see how much you cared, they would finally care in return. Yet every time you reached out, your worth slipped further away, hidden beneath the weight of needing to be enough. The truth is, no one who truly loves you will make you chase them. Love is not a prize to be won, but a presence to be shared. Dignity means recognizing that your peace is worth more than any relationship that costs your self-respect. When you stop pursuing what diminishes you, something profound happens. The emptiness left behind is not loneliness, it is space for healing. You begin to rediscover your voice, your confidence, your boundaries. You stop asking why you weren't chosen and start realizing you no longer need to be. Desperation fades as self-respect grows, and with it comes a calm power that no rejection can shake. The people who once tested your patience lose their hold over you because you have remembered your vow. You choosing dignity does not mean closing your heart. It means opening it inward first. It is the decision to love yourself enough to walk away from what dishonors your spirit. You are no longer begging to be seen. You are standing in your own light. And in that light, you realize that the love you were chasing outside was waiting for you all along. The love that begins and ends with honoring who you are. There is a silence that speaks louder than every word ever uttered. A silence born not of weakness, but of wisdom. When you finally step back from someone who took your presence for granted, the void you leave behind begins to echo in their world. For so long, he believed you would always be there, ready to forgive, ready to explain, ready to chase. He mistook your kindness for dependency and your patience for permission. But then, one day, without anger or announcement, you disappeared. You stopped arguing, stopped reaching out, and chose peace over chaos. That moment, the shock of your absence became the lesson he never expected to learn. Your peace unsettles him, because it reveals a truth he worked hard to ignore. As long as you were there, he could continue to believe he had control, that your emotions would orbit his moods, that your world revolved around his attention. But silence breaks that illusion. It shows him that your love was never his possession, that your strength was never his to command. The absence he once thought he wanted becomes unbearable, not because he misses you, but because he must finally face himself. Your peace holds up a mirror. He cannot escape a mirror, reflecting what he lost through arrogance, indifference, and pride in your own life. You may have felt the pull to return, to explain, to make them see what they refused to see before. But healing begins when you realize that you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone. Your absence is not punishment, it is power. It is the quiet declaration that your boundaries are sacred, that your love is a gift, not a guarantee. When you choose peace, You stop being part of their chaos, and that withdrawal becomes the consequence they never anticipated. The stillness you create forces them to feel the discomfort they once numbed through your attention piece is not passive. It is the strongest statement you can make after chaos. It carries the energy of self-respect, the vibration of closure, and the wisdom of release. When you stop reacting, the game ends, and they are left playing against themselves. Over time, the same silence they thought was nothing becomes everything, a space filled with realization, regret, and reflection. Yet your healing does not depend on their understanding. Your peace is for you. It is the reward for choosing yourself after being ignored, for nurturing your heart after being drained, for loving yourself enough to walk away. And as your life grows quieter and stronger, you begin to see that disappearing was not an act of loss, but of transformation. You no longer live to be seen, understood, or validated. Your peace becomes your presence, your dignity becomes your voice, and without even trying, your absence teaches the lesson your words never could. There is a moment in every person's life when exhaustion becomes awakening, when the heart finally understands that love should not be chased to be real. For too long, you may have believed that persistence meant passion, that proving your worth was part of loving deeply. You gave, you tried, you waited believing that if you just showed enough devotion, it would one day be returned. But love that must be chased is never love that nourishes. It feeds the illusion of connection while quietly draining the soul. Reclaiming yourself begins when you stop running after what continues to run from you and start turning that same energy inward. The habit of chasing love often begins with the fear of being alone, the quiet ache of wanting to be seen, to be chosen, to be enough. But every time you chase, you move further away from yourself. You begin to shape your worth around someone else's attention, losing touch with the steady truth that your value is not dependent on being desired. When you finally pause, when you stop reaching out and stand still long enough to feel your own heartbeat, you begin to reclaim your power. The love you were searching for outside starts to awaken within, calm and unwavering, free from the need for validation in your own life. You may remember how much peace was lost in the pursuit of someone who could not meet you where you stood. You may have confused chaos with chemistry, attention with affection, and longing with love, but clarity arrives when the chasing stops. In that stillness, you see that real love does not require pursuit, it invites presence. You begin to understand that the right connection does not demand that you shrink yourself to fit, nor does it make you question your worth. Reclaiming yourself means remembering that you are whole, even when someone else walks away. It means realizing that peace is more valuable than promises, and that silence can speak louder than any apology you never received. When you no longer chase love, you begin to attract peace. Your boundaries strengthen, your energy rises, and your confidence returns. You stop settling for being almost loved and start waiting for love that is certain, steady, and mutual. The emptiness you once feared becomes the space where healing begins. You find joy in your own company, strength in your solitude, and beauty in your becoming. What once felt like rejection transforms into redirection, guiding you back to the person you were before you started seeking approval in someone else's eyes. Reclaiming yourself is not about closing your heart. It is about opening it wisely. It is the courage to say no to what depletes you and yes to what aligns with your peace. The moment you stop chasing love, you stop losing yourself. You rise not in bitterness, but in clarity, not in pride, but in self-respect. And as you walk forward, grounded in your own worth, you realize that the love you were chasing was never ahead of you. It was waiting within you all along. There comes a time when pain no longer breaks you. It reshapes you. When the very thing that once brought you to your knees becomes the force that lifts you higher than you have ever been. Disappearing from someone who took your love for granted is not an act of weakness. It is the beginning of awakening. It is the moment you stop waiting for closure from someone who only offered confusion and start creating peace within yourself. The pain that once kept you tied to the past becomes the energy that pushes you forward, transforming your wounds into wisdom and your heartbreak into healing in the end. Walking away from what no longer values you is not the end of love. It is the beginning of self-love. The journey from chasing to choosing yourself is one of quiet strength and deep awakening. You no longer need to beg for attention or plead for understanding because you have learned that real love does not require you to lose yourself in order to keep someone else. Your peace, your dignity, your boundaries, these are not barriers to love. They are the foundation of it. The person who thought you would always chase will one day understand that your silence was not emptiness, but evolution. You did not disappear to punish, you disappeared to heal, and in that healing you found your power. Every tear you shed became a seed of strength, every heartbreak a step toward freedom. You are no longer seeking love that costs your self-respect. You are creating a life that reflects your worth. This is your awakening, to stand whole within yourself, to love without losing, to give without breaking. You have stopped chasing shadows and started walking in your own light, and that, at last, is the purest form of love. For so long, you may have believed that disappearing meant giving up, that walking away meant defeat. But in truth, it was your soul reclaiming its power. Each tear you cried was a cleansing, each sleepless night a silent rebirth. The person who made you doubt your worth unknowingly became the reason you rediscovered it. Pain has a strange way of awakening the parts of you that comfort never could. It cracks the shell of illusion, exposing the strength that has been waiting beneath your fear. When you finally choose yourself, something shifts. The ache turns into clarity, the longing into self-respect, the silence into peace in your own life. You may have noticed how the deepest pain often brings the greatest transformation. The moment you stop trying to fix what keeps breaking you, you begin to heal. Disappearing was not about vanishing. It was about returning to your truth, your balance, your power. You stopped running after love that only hurt you and started walking toward the life that honors you. What once felt like emptiness begins to feel like freedom. You no longer crave their attention because you have found something more fulfilling, your own presence. The same heart that once begged to be chosen now beats with self-worth that needs no validation. Turning pain into power is not an instant process. It is a journey of remembering who you are beyond the heartbreak. It means no longer seeing yourself as a victim, but as a survivor, no longer blaming the storm, but learning how to dance in the rain. Every experience, even the painful ones, carries a message to rise, to grow, to let go. When you disappear from what drains you, you make space for what nurtures you. That space becomes sacred, filled with quiet strength and renewed purpose. You begin to move differently, speak differently, love differently, not from fear, but from awareness. And as you continue this path, you realize that your disappearance was never about abandoning anyone. It was about awakening to yourself. The pain that once silenced you has become your teacher, your guide, your power. You are no longer defined by what hurt you, but by how you rose from it. In that rising, you find your awakening a peaceful strength that no heartbreak can ever take away.